So, as I said at the start of the service, our theme is about the power of prayer. Now, I'd originally planned for the children to do some experiments with balloons at this point. The service is all age worship after all, but you'll have to be content with watching me do that on YouTube in a few minutes. Meanwhile, let's look at the gospel. Let's take a look at a heartfelt cry from the gospel story, the cry of an anguished parent whose child is suffering and who doesn't know whether he believes or not. I do believe, help my unbelief. I do believe, help my unbelief. Have you ever prayed a prayer like that? Because I know I have. Life can be hard. It's hard at the moment. It's hard even in lives of health and privilege, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And the Bible makes no bones about something we find really quite hard to stomach, that God allows his people to suffer. The message of the book of Job is essentially forget any easy explanation of suffering. God simply tells Job, who wants to know the reason for his troubles, you wouldn't understand. Now that's tough, because I think it would be fair to say that the harsh reality of human suffering destabilises many a person's faith, especially when that suffering is close to home. Like author Anne Lamott praying for a young mother with advanced lymphoma, we might pray in hope, but then protest to God, what on earth are you doing? Now, I'm not a young mother, and thankfully I don't have advanced lymphoma. But the past 2 years have been very difficult for me health-wise. But it's not just my own situation that makes it quite difficult for me to preach on a healing story from the Gospels. Both within this church and within my wider circle of acquaintances, I can think of quite a number of people who would be, to be honest, quite offended by glib assurances that all is required for healing today is unshakable faith and the power of prayer. Now that's not to say that I haven't known people experience healing, but again, to quote the Rolling Stones, you can't always get what you want. Even if you come to God with what seemed to be an absolute watertight case and impeccable motives for asking, you can't always get what you want. For several years now, I've found that journaling my thoughts and writing daily prayers has been a really useful spiritual discipline. It really helps me focus when I pray or if I want to reflect on something that I've read. Consequently, I've got an absolute stack of A5 books, old prayer diaries and journals into which I've poured a lot of angst, love, prayer and reflection over the years. And I hardly ever go back and read these journals. I've thought about making a bonfire of them on more than one occasion. However, I felt that I had to return to my diaries and journals from 2018-2019 in preparation for this service. As I've got all the dates for my hospital admissions logged, it was very easy to find the prayers for my darkest, scariest and worst bad news days and the weeks that followed them. In May 2018, 2 surgeries had been sudden and traumatic, the news had been very bad, and my prognosis was at best uncertain. There are, therefore, you may not be surprised to hear, strong elements of lament and anxiety in my journals for that period. And it's important for us to remember that anxiety is a normal gut response to stress, and that lament is an entirely appropriate response to bring to God. Remarkably, there was little anger in my journal, mainly brokenness, which isn't such a bad thing, by the way. There are hardly any direct prayers for my own healing, but there were many, many cries for help. More than anything, I just longed for God's presence in the midst of it all. I was lost, weary, and I felt so empty. On one bad day, I had transcribed the lyrics of a song by the Rend Collective into my journal. Lord, you know I believe, help my unbelief. What's true in the light is still true in the dark. You're good and you're kind and you care for this heart. Lord, I believe. You weep with me. If you're following the YouTube links, I'll take a break now and invite you to listen to that song if you like.